Welcome to another lesson in programming in Java. In this lesson, we'll be covering fundamental statements. So that's going to include some topics like the Java standard libraries. We'll take a deeper look at attributes and methods and how to actually call on methods. We'll talk about reading the Java docs because that's an important skill when using Java, especially if we're going to be relying on these standard libraries. And then we'll take a look at some actual standard classes that we'll be using in this week's lab and assignment. So introduction into fundamental statements. So a little bit of review. Remember, a statement is in Java at least, is a single unit of execution. This could be a declaration, expression, or control structure. We'll talk about the different types in this lesson. So each statement in Java has to end in a semicolon. Similar to C and C++, that's different than Python, which has no end symbol. Remember in the previous lesson on data and variables, we explored declaration statements when we declared variables or constants. We've already used some of the most common expression statements, including the print statement. We'll talk about other types of statements in this lesson. So declaration statements, something we should be familiar with now in declaring variables. I know some of you have been wondering, how are these variables going to be useful? Why are they so important? Now that we're adding more skills to our skill set, of course, we're going to see how these variables can be useful in more complicated programs. So remember, variables and constants need to be initialized or assigned a value before you use the variable. Otherwise, the code won't compile. In a declaration statement, you have the option to initialize it. This is completely optional. Just remember, if you're going to use it, you got to either initialize or assign. Now, if you're going to do assignment, that's no longer going to be part of the declaration statement. That'll be an expression statement. So expression statements perform actions like variable assignments, method calls, or value changes. So variable assignments, remember, that's if you're giving a value after the declaration. We call these statements now expression statements. Another important type of expression statement is the method call, which we're going to be taking a deep dive today. We're going to be taking an even deeper dive on methods and classes later on. But, one thing at a time. We're taking it slow so we don't feel overwhelmed when we're learning this new language. So variable assignment. That's a common expression statement. So you give a value after declaration. So that's one example of an expression statement. And then, of course, calling on Java methods, another common type. So here we have an assignment. So notice we don't have to put the type on X because we're assuming that this has already been declared elsewhere. So there must be an int X somewhere in my code before this line. X++, we're going to learn about operators in some of the next lessons. This is to increment X by 1. So X would be 6 after this line executes. And then, of course, we have a method call. We're doing the print method here, the print ln or print new line, print with a new line at the end. So this is going to print whatever X is. In this case, X would be 6 in this program. Again, we'll talk about operators more in some of the next lessons. Control flow statements. So taking a preview to some of the future lessons as well. So these control the order in which code runs. So another type of statement. So these statements have the ability, let me fix that, have the ability to make decisions. So these statements are all about deciding which code to execute and which code not to run. So we'll learn very soon about these statements in the next few lessons, but wanted to give you all a preview on what that looks like. And then, of course, looping statements. I saw this a lot in the discussion assignment. Your journey in the Java language so far, right? I saw some of you talking about how loops can be a little bit daunting for you, a little bit intimidating. Again, something we'll cover in some of the future lessons. So another name for looping statements are iterative statements, because every time a loop executes, it's an iteration of that code. So these are fundamental in programming and allow you to execute a block of code repeatedly until a condition is met. So looping is useful so that if you need to run a piece of code more than one time or based on a certain condition, where it might run, either no times or zero or one time or 100 times, any number you want, you're going to be using these looping statements. So this kind of goes back to dry, do not repeat yourself. Rather than copy pasting the system.out.println 5 different times, we can just use a loop to print this 5 different times. So this is shortening the code, making it more efficient, a little bit more readable as well if you understand loops. And then also adhering to the do not repeat yourself, right? Rather than putting system.out.println 5 times, we're making it just this one line inside the for loop. Again, we're this kind of looking ahead, so don't worry about this. I know it kind of looks like gibberish. That's fine. We'll talk about this in some of the next few lessons.